If you are a married believer trying to navigate this intimacy thing without shame, go ahead and hit that subscribe button because you are in the right place.
I think there's an understanding women's bodies are beautiful. God made our bodies beautiful. That beauty can hold power. It can be enticing. It can be used for good or not. When I've worked with a lot of different husbands, they're going to make sure that, or the wife has an orgasm, or that's kind of a goal or a desire. For some women I've worked with, the idea of them being focused on first feels really uncomfortable.
Welcome to the space where we tell our truth. Testimony, healing, breaking shame loose. Learning our bodies and walking by faith. Intimacy God's way, right here is the place. Sex Ed for Saints, Mondays at 6. We believe in the power of the story. Not just pain, but redemption and glory. Faith in the rhythm, hearts in the mix. Trust in educators. Mondays at 6, we're overcoming by the word of these testimonies. People getting free when we speak what's holy. Healing in our hearts, shame starts to split. Every story told, another chain gets stripped. Learning our bodies, learning His way. Intimacy and faith, walking day by day. This is where we heal, where the truth sticks. Sex Ed for Saints, Mondays at 6.
I'm so excited to finally share this book with you. Hey God, Can I is available now. Find the link in my bio to get your copy.
Hey friends, quick pause in this lesson because I need to put you onto something that has been blessing so many households. This episode has been sponsored by Covenant Eyes, the accountability app that helps you protect your eyes, your mind, and your marriage. If you're serious about keeping your digital life pure, guarded, and God honoring, Covenant Eyes is a game changer. It helps you to stay accountable online and creates a safe space for your heart and your home. And listen, because you are a part of the Marriage Lab, you get 30 days free when you use my code Marriage Lab. So go ahead, take that step, cover your devices, and cover your covenant.
Thank you all for coming on to the Sex Ed for Saints podcast. Listen, I am so excited to have my girl Melissa on the stream. She is bringing the gems today. She is bringing the gems. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, orgasms and gaps. Oh my, right? And so before we get into the episode though, I do have questions from audience that I have in my bio on my Instagram. And so if you would go to the Instagram, the Marriage Lab LLC, you would find in a link in my bio where you can ask questions anonymously, and myself and my guests will answer them on the show. And so, welcome, Melissa. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to
Hi,
have
thank you for
you.
having me.
Thank you for coming. And so, okay, so my question from my audience member is, my husband orgasms every time we have sex, but I don't. I want to experience orgasms, but the kind of sex we're having just isn't getting me there. I don't know how to bring it up without hurting his feelings. What can I do? What can I do? Listen, this is a very common thing within marriage. And, Melissa and I, we're going to answer these questions as best as we can. So, what do you think? What are your thoughts, Melissa?
Yeah. Well, so it's actually kind of interesting because a lot of times women kind of believe that if we ask or talk about this with our husbands, that we're going to hurt their feelings. And truly, in a lot of the experience that I've had in working with couples, is the husbands actually aren't hurt by that. They want to know how to please you, right? They want to know what to do to help you. And so when women are worried or not sure how to bring up the conversation, often it's more has to do with their own embarrassment or their own kind of assumption that it's going to hurt the husband's feelings. And that really hasn't been the experience that I've had with my different therapy clients. So sometimes it's just the confidence to be able to start the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And I absolutely love that. And just to add to that, because we don't really have a lot of context around this question. And so when we're answering just making an assumption around the marriage. And I love what Melissa said. And absolutely, just to add to that, sometimes we don't really know what's going on with you or why you're not having these orgasms. And so I think it's also important. A lot of women don't really understand their bodies, what makes them orgasm. And if you are actually orgasming by penetration alone, you're kind of in the minority. And I'm excited to get in the conversation because we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And so, welcome again to the show. And Melissa, before we go on, just tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
So, my name is Melissa Gendreau. I have been a mental health therapist for the past 16 years. I've worked with secular society, I've worked with Christian faith couples. I've worked in nonprofits. I've had my own private practice. And then in 2025, I just started my own Forward Path business that is life coaching for life purpose and marriage. I also have a podcast, courses, a community. I've kind of got all things going right now.
Yeah, I love what you're doing. I love what you're doing, especially within faith-based communities. But before we get into the conversation, I want everybody to have like a clear understanding of what even is the orgasm gap. Help us to understand that a little bit.
Sure. Well, first, it's actually kind of surprising. When we are talking about women experiencing orgasms, the research actually finds that women experience orgasms more within marriage than they do in hookup culture. So that's a positive, but in some ways, I think that's maybe surprising information. Um, but then there is a difference between secular marriages and faith-based marriages. So the orgasm gap is the idea that husbands are experiencing orgasm more frequently than the wives are.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And that's so interesting, especially when you mention, that outside of marriage that they're actually experiencing orgasms less. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it actually has to do with, when people are having sex as just hookups, it has
Hmm.
nothing to do with relationships. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with emotions.
Hmm.
And it's honestly, it's purely selfish. It's
Yeah.
it's just carnal. It's
Yeah.
just for pleasure. And so within that, guys are kind of focusing on themselves. And as I'm sure we'll talk a little bit, guys generally can come to orgasm faster and easier than women can.
Yeah.
So if that's the focus of the hookup is just simply for the physical nature, then guys are likely going to achieve it faster and not really
Mhm.
care if the
Yeah.
woman does or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it just shows how important God's design really is.
Mhm.
And he's very intentional in how he designed, intimacy to be. And, inside of marriage, you get the full benefits because you get to work towards something. But why do you think women's pleasure historically has been centered around, well, it has not been centered around marriage conversations?
Yeah. I think part of it has to do with a fear, actually, of parents, of churches, of pastors when it comes to the conversations about sex, because there's clearly the understanding that we don't want people who aren't married to be having sex because that's not God's design.
Mhm.
So I think the fear is if we talk about how beautiful sex is, how good it feels. If we're talking about orgasms, I think that the fear is that non-married teens, young adults, all of those people will want to have sex more.
Yeah.
And I think what's really missing from that, or how that can really be fixed, is to really focus on why it's so beautiful within the marriage,
Yeah.
for them to be able to understand kind of exactly what I just said. If it's just hookups, if it's prior to marriage, it loses all of the beauty of God's design. It loses the intimacy. It loses the emotional, relational connections in the way that He really wanted it to be. Um, so I think there ends up being this disparity. So we hear a lot of just don't do it, just don't do
Mhm.
it before marriage. And then once you get married, it's okay, now I'm supposed to be okay with doing this.
Yeah.
And for women, there's a little bit more that goes into it to need to be able to understand their body, to
Yeah.
be able to experience the pleasure in the way that God actually designed.
Yeah, I love that because, a lot of the women who I speak with, that is the struggle, right?
Mhm.
Um, Ironically, just today, I got tagged in a post with a young lady who was just about to get married, and her
Mhm.
post said, "I am so afraid for this sex that we're about to
Oh,
have." And she was like, "Can anybody give me any advice?" And she posted it as somebody who was anonymous, but it's just the fear about it because you're thinking that you're getting ready to go into something that is not beautiful, right? We
mhm.
should be thinking about sex differently. Like you can't even really focus on having good sex because your mind is already saying it's bad, it's bad, it's bad before
Right.
you even get married. And one of the things she said is like we are waiting to have sex. I've never experienced sex, and she was in her 30s,
Mm,
which was
mhm.
another surprise. And so
Yeah.
I think that people really need or churches really need to start talking about the beauty
Mhm.
around intimacy and sex and pleasure, so that people can stop being afraid of it. But how much of the orgasm gap is physical and how much of it is psychological or relational?
Yeah. So a vast majority of it is psychological and relational. Now there are some women that do have some maybe physical components or maybe how their cervix is formed, or there's some components that way. But the majority of it is psychological and relational.
Mhm, mhm.
Hmm.
Now, when it comes to, the psychological aspect, women are tending to think about a lot of different things. How does that impact, the sex that we have?
Yeah. So, honestly, for a woman to be able to achieve orgasm, she needs to be focusing solely on how good everything is feeling at that moment. And women have a tendency to not be focusing on that. We oftentimes can struggle to shut our brains down, constantly thinking about what are all of the other things that need to be taken care of at this moment or soon or what's coming up, right? So it's, um, when does dinner need to be done? When do the kids need to get picked up? And have they finished their homework? When's laundry? So they stop. They need to stop focusing on everything else, and in the moment, just focus on what is happening in the here and now. Um, and then you have the concerns of, how do I look right now?
Mhm.
Am I attractive enough? Am I sexy enough? What does my husband think right now? Um, so we have kind of these dual things. So, yes, maybe they might be thinking in the moment, but they're thinking about the negative components of their body as opposed to thinking about what is physically happening to them at that moment.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's so good because I don't know how like women sometimes we don't know how to shut that side off. Right?
Mhm.
Especially when you have so many different things going on, in
Mhm.
the brain. And, I think it's important to understand that, in order for you to be having the best sex that you can, you do have to figure out ways to like, neutralize those thoughts. And talk to me a little bit about stress because a lot of that could impact, the orgasms that you have. So how does stress impact orgasms?
Yeah. Well, so when a woman is stressed, um, everything that everything in her body is going to be kind of tightened. So in that process, while having sex, the ability for a woman to be able to orgasm is she has to be able to let go, and that's not only letting go of emotionally and kind of her mind letting go, but she has to be able to let go of her body.
Mhm.
And if she's stressed, everything is going to be tightened up. And that's not going to be able to cause the release to be able to take place in the same way. So for some women, even if they describe wanting to be able to have an orgasm,
Mhm.
um, either stress of the day or sometimes even stress of wanting to have the orgasm, and they're putting the extra stress on themselves to be able to try to achieve it,
Mhm.
can cause problems as well.
Yeah, yeah. And, I was doing research one day and I learned that stress is the number one reason, well, between stress and dehydration was
Yeah.
the number one reason for vaginal dehydration as well. And so,
Mhm.
well, dryness. And so I think it's so important that we learn how to decompress and just not be stressed or figure out ways that we can manage the stress that we have. And so I think that's so important, especially when we are, trying to condition our bodies for pleasure.
Mhm.
But we were talking about it a little bit earlier, but how has the purity culture influenced a woman's ability to enjoy sex inside marriage? I want us to go a little bit further into that.
Yeah. Well, I think there ends up being this misunderstanding, and we see this in a couple instances, honestly, in Old Testament, where women. I think there's an understanding women's bodies are beautiful. God made our bodies beautiful, and that beauty can hold power. It can be enticing. It can be used for good or not good. Just like anything that God has created and made, right? We can choose whether we use it for good or not good. I think there's instances in the Bible where women use their bodies seductively, or there is these ideas of women enticing men,
Mhm.
and that really gets focused on as these negative things, these sinful things, without the context of understanding what was going on. It wasn't that her body was beautiful. It wasn't that she understood how to use her body in those ways. It was
Mhm.
with who she was doing that with, right?
Mhm.
Um, a woman knowing that her body is beautiful, a woman knowing how to be pleasurable, how to receive pleasure within a marriage is never sinful. And so it's loss of context, I think. And so then this idea then is, well, if you are, as a woman, if you're sexual in nature, then you're this Jezebel, or you're this sinful woman. And that's not the context at all. But we seem to get those two things um, mixed up. And so then purity culture again goes back to um, some of it can be really strict on making sure that um, no sex before marriage, which again, that concept is good. But then it can turn into anything discussing or talking about sex or understanding your own body, or a woman knowing what's going to be pleasurable. All of those things then suddenly also turn into bad.
Yeah.
And so it really seems to depend on how a girl was taught. What was the extent of maybe strictness associated with the conversations about sex?
Yeah.
And for some families, sometimes some honestly purity curriculum turns the idea of a woman's sexuality and sensuality
Mhm.
into this negative. Um, but I think if anyone takes the time to read Song of Songs,
Yes.
um, we can understand that it's beautiful and it's
Mhm.
passionate and enticing. That's kind of the whole point of it. Multiple times throughout that book, the bride says to her friends, "Don't awaken love before it's ready."
Mhm.
And so letting us know the beauty of it's not supposed to be until after marriage,
Mhm.
but it is beautiful then within marriage.
Yeah.
And it's being able to hold both of those things true at the same time, and I don't think we've done a very good job of that in our
Mhm.
culture right now. We tend to be kind of all or nothing and kind of extremes, without knowing how to hold both of those ands.
I love that. I love that. You said something there in the
Mhm.
scripture where it says, "Don't awaken love until it's ready."
Right.
Um, I want us to talk a little bit about, what are some ways that you can pretty much position yourself, and we're talking to, just real quick, I want to talk to somebody who might be single who's watching this, because when they get married, all of that is going to transfer over. So what is a tool that you can use, just something real small, to help someone who is single
Mhm.
understand how to be sensual without having to be sexual, so that when they do get married, it transfers over to having the best orgasms that you can, or best marriage that you can, when you do get married. Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um, I think sometimes it is, um, I think one of the best ways for a woman to actually feel, um, sexual, sensual, is confidence in
Mhm.
herself. And a lot of times that's not even just physical confidence. It's comfort in who she is as
Mhm.
a human being, who God made her to be. Um, w- we find that a lot actually for men. If men are can describe who they're most attracted to, right? I think as women, we get these ideas in our heads of what we think that looks like for a lot of men. There's this certain size, certain shape, certain presentation, certain clothing style, and most often for guys, it's the women who feel the most comfortable and confident in their own skin.
Yeah.
It's the women who feel comfortable to be able to just be themselves.
Mhm.
And that presents so well
Mhm.
in relationships, but for yourself too. When you can feel comfortable. So, for the single women, if you can feel comfortable in who God created you to be, and your process right now in this time of being single is to dive into and focus on those gifts, those talents, those identity and purpose that God created. Those things are going to help you feel more comfortable in who He created you to be. That helps even then when it comes to how did He put you together, right? Like He chose to have you be certain height, certain eye color, certain hairstyle, certain all of those things on purpose.
Mhm.
If a woman can embrace that and
Mhm.
feel comfortable with those attributes and recognize that her body is worth taking care of well because it's the gift that God gave, all of those things combined help you to feel more comfortable inside and out. And that always translates within the marriage of how you can interact with your spouse later on, because then you feel more comfortable to have some of these conversations that maybe are a little bit uncomfortable or a little bit
Mhm.
embarrassing if you feel more comfortable with yourself. And then it allows you to be able to talk more intimately with your spouse about your own body and exploring those things by yourself as well as with your spouse. So a lot of it has to do with just confidence.
Yeah, I love that because a lot of times when women are in marriages, they have not done the work prior to, and they're being very surprised about the sex that they're having within marriage. And so I
Mhm.
think that for somebody who was single who is listening, I think it's important that we share that because now they get to understand like, hey, I do need to be intentional about the steps that I make so that when I do get married I'm not really having these problems, or I hope to not have these problems, or having some self awareness on, these are some things that could potentially come up. So let me do the work that I need right now so that
Mhm.
it's not as difficult when I shift over. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And earlier we were talking a little bit about, the wives not being afraid to talk to their spouses about,
Mhm.
the experience. And I find that on my side as well. And so, why do you
Mhm.
think it's so difficult for women to have these conversations?
Yeah. Well, so I think it's kind of multiple actually. So for one, I think there's a lot of women who don't know themselves. So they don't really know what does feel good.
Right.
So because they don't really know how to talk with their spouses about it. And then for women, uh, the thought process and the concern a lot of times for women when it surrounds sex is does my husband find me sexy? Do they
Mhm.
find me arousing? Do they find me pleasing? And I think a lot of times there's that assumption that guys have that worry or concern too. And there can be definitely in some way, but it's not nearly the way that women do. So again, there seems to be this projection that if a woman talks about how they can have a better sex life, that the guy's gonna take it personal. And, uh, again, that just doesn't in my experience, that just doesn't tend to be true. Um, husbands, men in general, their kind of nature is the fix it
Mhm.
guys, right? Like, we go to them with a problem and right away they want to fix it. This is an area that they would gladly like to work on and fix. Um, because there tends to be a lot of really positives that go
Mhm.
with that. Um, so it really does seem to be more the sometimes lack of knowledge for women of just they
Mhm.
aren't sure. And then this perceived worry that it's going to hurt the guy's feelings. When again, most guys will happily go about trying to make this better.
I love that. So what kind of well, let's say that they are having the conversation. What are some ways that they can introduce to their spouses? Hey, this right here doesn't make me feel good, but this does. How do they relate that? Like, how can they communicate that to them without making them feel, inadequate?
Sure. Um, a lot of times it's focusing on what feels good as opposed to what doesn't feel as good. So if there can be a little bit more cueing of when something does feel good, whether it's position, whether we're talking manual, any of those types of things, if it feels good, let them know. And then if it's not feeling good, there's sometimes instead of saying that doesn't feel as good, you can say, I really liked how you did this. And so it helps them kind of just go back to what they were doing.
Mhm.
But again, oftentimes women can be more direct than I think they can. Obviously,
Mhm.
within reason, tone is always good,
Mhm.
right? Like, so if you're saying it in a unkind way, if you're saying it in, "Why are you doing that?"
Mhm.
That's not gonna go as well. But it can it can generally be a little bit more direct than I think
Mhm.
what women think it can be.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that, especially if you're like in the middle of the act and you're trying to guide them and you feel something good. It's
Mhm.
good to tell them, but if it doesn't feel good, like be gentle
Right.
and saying the right thing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. But how can a woman begin learning her body in a healthy, God honoring way? Because even that process is learning. And so how can she,
Mhm.
what are some tools that she can use?
I think sometimes it's even knowing what female anatomy is.
Hmm.
Um, I'm honestly surprised sometimes at, grown women who aren't educated and aware of even all of their body parts. Where the idea of even just saying vagina or clitoris is embarrassing or uncomfortable for them.
Hmm.
So sometimes it's even just doing research. And if it can be just an old school anatomy book,
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be because I know I've had different clients that have like, Melissa, I'm not Googling that. I have no idea what's going to come up. Um, that's perfectly acceptable. Um,
Mhm,
you can honestly go onto like WebMD, go onto like an actual medical site if
mhm,
you're worried about what's gonna, come up on your feed. Um, and even just look at what basic anatomy is.
mhm,
Um, Sometimes that can be a good starting place if a woman really doesn't have a whole lot of background information.
mhm,
And then other times, and I know for a lot of women that the idea of this is really uncomfortable, but take a mirror and look
mhm.
at yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and again, it's remembering God made you. He chose to make a woman's anatomy in the way that he did. There's nothing wrong or dirty about looking at the parts that he created. And even just understanding those parts is a good process.
Mhm,
Understanding where your clitoris is. A lot of it is just education. And again, there seems to be a lot of shame surrounding even knowing what those things are. Um, I know I have had some women who are just adamant against the idea of touching themselves solo. If that's you, if that's a woman that's listening to this, it's okay then to have your husband be the one who's touching you and have it be more like hand over hand, where there's the ability then for the woman to be able to um, just let him know what feels good. When I've had couples do this, I generally say, like, this is more of just an information gathering session. This generally is not a, um, while you're having sex or even for the point of being intimate. This is more just to help her understand her body as well as then for husbands to know what feels good on her body.
I love that. It always amazes me how many women don't know their bodies
Yeah.
and won't Google it. Just like you said, they're like, I don't know what comes up. I actually wrote a book. It's called Hey God, Can I? And I put
Mhm.
pictures of, the vulva in there, the clitoris in there,
Yeah.
just so that they can, get an idea like, hey, you can look in
Mhm.
this book and look at your anatomy.
Yeah.
They're not doing it. They won't even Google it. And I'm just like this is your body. This is something
Yep.
that God created. He said
Yeah.
that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Like,
Mhm.
embrace all of it and learn you.
Mhm.
And when you were talking about, women not or being afraid to touch themselves, I
Yeah.
think that also came a little bit from the purity culture because you understand by touch.
Mhm.
When we're babies, and you're
Yeah.
growing up, you learn by touching things. You put your hand
Mhm.
on things, you put your mouth on things, and all of that is teaching you something. And
Mhm.
so you get in your own head of thinking that you can't touch your own body, to
Mhm.
understand your body. You like I truly believe that women need to learn their bodies. Sex
Right.
101, learn your body.
Right.
It
And
is that
actually,
important.
I'll even say, where when I'm working with parents, one of the things that I strongly recommend to parents of littles is to make sure that when you are telling them their body parts, please use the word vagina and penis.
Mhm,
Please, please don't use the code words, whatever code word you come up with,
mhm,
because in doing that, so we don't do that for any other part of our body, right? Like
mhm,
you don't call your elbow anything else besides your elbow. And if those are the only parts we're now giving code words for,
mhm,
you're unintentionally teaching your
mhm.
kids that
Yeah.
there's something not right about that.
Mhm.
There's something wrong. There's something inappropriate, right? And
Yeah.
it's recognizing again, we can go back to scripture that in Genesis, Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed. And so it's making sure that we're not starting, even from a really young age, this belief that there's any part of your body that is shameful. Um, Now, it's not that we should go around and be showing all of those parts to everybody.
Mhm,
That's actually what makes them so beautiful, is those are parts that are meant just for our spouse.
mhm,
Um, but they weren't meant to be shameful. And so it's making sure that we're not unintentionally doing that to our kids or I think moms, especially when if we have daughters, as they are going through puberty, as they are developing, as they're doing those, please don't shy away from those conversations. Help them understand their body parts, help them understand the development of it, the beauty of it. I think sometimes even when moms are talking to their daughters about their menstruation and that it gets talked about so negatively.
mhm,
Um, and when we talk about that process negatively, again, it's unintentionally talking negatively about the woman's body. Yet God, again, designed it that way specific. There's
mhm.
reason why he did that. Certainly there's aspects of having our periods that are not fun and they're, not comfortable always. Um, but it's beautiful, really, the cyclical nature of it, preparing for a baby, the renewal of it, all of those things actually can be viewed really beautifully. And so if it turns into this, oh, it's negative, oh, it's terrible, oh, it's all these things, um, we end up having these kind of just negative views of being a woman in general. And none of that then is going to help when we continue to keep adding on to these pieces of intimacy and of intercourse and of our body parts, if there's other aspects of our bodies that we are viewing shameful surrounding that too.
Yeah, I love this. Listen, y'all women got a lot of work to do, okay? Got a lot of work to do. I love how you brought it up with the kids because,
Mm,
as sex educators, therapists, all of that, I know it's very common for us to talk to our kids about sex and things. Funny story this week, I was doing a live and my son, I have two small boys, 7 and 6, and they fight like boys. And I'm in the middle of a live and he runs in and he's like, he's telling me that the other brother, he punched me in the nutsack. And I said, your what? Your penis? He said, yeah, my penis. But it's very common in our house to use, the proper terminology because
Yeah.
I want them to grow up being comfortable about the words that they use.
Mhm.
And, even in that tone, it made me smile because they are so comfortable, even though they are young.
Yeah.
And, they're going to grow up with a healthy mindset around sex because we talk about it in such a positive way. And I think that there is beauty when you communicate to your children,
Mhm.
this is, something that God created, it's something that God designed. And when you grow up and you get married and you get into, your marriage bed, you have such an ease around it because you've been comfortable your whole life. And so
Right.
I think it's beautiful that you mentioned that. So I appreciate that. I
Mhm.
want to talk a little bit about, foreplay, right? Because we were
Sure.
talking about it earlier,
Mhm.
where you mentioned, in terms of like touching yourself, your
Yeah.
spouse gets involved. But what are some things that women can do during foreplay? How much time do they need? Like, let's get into
Mhm.
all of that.
Yeah. Well, and part of the idea of foreplay, it can actually really help a woman get out of her head, right?
Mhm.
So even if this means the idea of scheduling sex, and I I know for a lot of people are like, wow, that sounds spontaneous. Um, but it actually can be a really positive thing for a lot of women if there's this idea of knowing that this is something that's going to happen, and so they can actually talk themselves into it or focus kind of all day long on this really beautiful thing that's going to take place. Um, because if we talk about arousal, a lot of times, this is kind of one of the reasons why I guess we'll say romance novels or more smut novels, um, can be really, popular for a lot of women, because rarely is it actually describing the sex act.
Mhm.
Most often, it's going into a lot of detail about the build up to it.
Mhm.
And those are really the components that cause a woman to get in the mood or get aroused. And sometimes it's even before the husband is even touching her, right? So it's the eye contact while he's, caressing her jaw. It's the incredibly tender kiss on the forehead in the morning saying, "I'm really looking forward to tonight." Right? It's these very beautiful, gentle things that can happen kind of throughout the day. It's the wife thinking about, how enjoyable it's going to be, foreshadowing the pleasure she's going to have. It's thinking about all of these things as if it's a certainty that it'll take place. Um, it's it's that positive that we do in kind of all of other areas of our life, right? Where if we're thinking about this positive growth mindset,
Yeah.
the same thing happens if we're talking about sex as well. And it's helping us to be able to be excited and get ready for those things kind of throughout the day. Once then we're actually talking about any of the physical stuff, it is whether it's the slow undressing or it's the gentle caresses. It's building all of these things up. That's the whole process for a woman most often is viewing all of it as a continual build up,
Mhm.
um, and being really mindful. So it's how do these things feel right now? How does
Mhm.
this feel? How's the next thing feel? And it's being very aware of those things and focusing on the beauty of getting to do this with the person that you said I do to, the person that you are supposed to trust most in the whole world, the person that you are doing life with. When a woman focuses on all of the emotional connection components along with the physical component, those tend to be the things that help the woman not be as stressed out, because there is the safety components, the stability components, the connection components. So it's so much more than just the physical experience that's happening.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So how can couples make pleasure a shared goal instead of a goal of like just performing?
Yeah. Um, Part of it is even just having the conversation. And I think um, for a lot of guys, honestly, I've when I've worked with a lot of different husbands, they will actually say they would prefer, if they're gonna make sure that the husband or the wife has an orgasm where that's kind of a goal or a desire, um, they would like to focus on that first. Um, and um whether that is manual, whether we're talking, whatever stimulation that the woman kinda comes to know she needs or, is helpful with that. A lot of guys would prefer to focus on that kind of first.
Hmm.
So then there isn't the performance component. There isn't the, fear or the worry that he's not going to be able to allow that to happen or that he is gonna orgasm too soon without that taking place.
Hmm.
Um, for some women I've worked with, the idea of them being focused on first feels really uncomfortable for them.
Hmm.
And again, this is where it's okay for women to experience pleasure.
Hmm.
I think that's again where a lot of women having to kind of get out of their own head,
Hmm.
that it's not okay or not acceptable. So a lot of it is kind of a mindset, and then um, maybe a change in order or a change in focus.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that because listen, that's how you know you got a really good husband when he's like, I want to make sure that you are pleased first.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But I do want to ask, like, what happens in a marriage when a woman starts experiencing consistent pleasure? Because you're just talking about it, like some women are uncomfortable receiving it, but what happens when they start receiving it consistently? What does that do to them?
Right. Um, well, there's actually a lot of positive chemical release for a woman in her brain when she experiences an orgasm. So women who achieve orgasm more frequently, they have decreased experiences of depression
Mm,
and anxiety. Um, they tend to have decreased cortisol levels, which is your stress hormone.
mhm,
So there's a lot of God made a lot of positive,
mhm.
reinforcements for that to take
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
Um, so not only just for a woman herself are there
Mhm,
positives, um, but when a woman is experiencing orgasms as well, there tends to be greater emotional connection that she feels towards her spouse too.
mhm,
And that tends to be pretty true for men anyway when they experience sex and orgasms. So when we're having both male and female feeling that, there tends to be increased benefits in just day to day life. And then there does tend to be a greater desire for frequency of
mhm,
intimacy. So most guys are not sad about that idea. And then it ends up being this positive thing for both husbands and wives too.
mhm. I love that. I love that. For some of the couples who have, gone years without satisfying sex, like, do you think
Mhm.
it's too long for them or too late for them?
No, no, not at all. And part of it is it's also having to understand how has that happened? Like what has taken place? Whether that is just unsatisfying sex or currently I have been seeing a trend where there's a lot of just sexless marriages,
Mhm,
where it's couples who have been together longer, where we're saying, maybe they've been together 20, 30 years and they have gone years without sex.
mhm,
And a lot of this plays into what we're talking about,
mhm,
where women weren't finding a whole lot of pleasure out of sex.
mhm,
And so it really started coming into, well, I'm not really getting a whole lot out of this. So
mhm.
what's the point?
Yeah.
And so for them, it ends up being not really something they're wanting to do. Maybe husbands who aren't wanting to force it, or so they start living just kind of parallel lives.
Mhm,
Um, But a lot of those things, it's figuring out what's kinda led to that. A lot of times it's not just the sex. It's not just the physical stuff.
Mhm.
Our sex tends to be kind of um, the physical response
Mhm.
of other things going on in your marriage. So
Mhm.
whether if there are emotional breakdowns, if there are resentments that have built up, whether physically or because of a lot of other things, um, but there's always the opportunity for reunification. There's always
Mhm.
opportunities to reconnect, grow back together. I mean, that's the God we serve is a God of
Yeah.
redemption. So sometimes it's really having to figure out the context for
Mhm.
those specific couples of where has the breakdown come from, um, and to be able to kind of work from there. For some, it's honestly just having to go back to fooling around, making out again,
Mhm.
figuring out what's fun about it, what's enjoyable, and getting to know their bodies all over again. Especially for if we have married couples who have been together for a while, your bodies change. A woman's body definitely changes over the years, but a guy's body changes too. And so it's learning each other all over again. The hope is
Yeah.
that you have the emotional connection, you have the relationship. So it's not the awkward new married anymore. It's the this is the person that I've done life with for so many years. We know each other.
Mhm.
So it doesn't have to be nearly as uncomfortable or um, awkward, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I love that, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I talk about all the time. I encounter women who have not orgasmed in 20 years, 30 years, and people think I'm crazy, but this is actually something that happens
Mhm.
um, more often than we think. And so I'm so glad that you're on here giving the tools and strategies that can help them with their struggles for women who are silent about their issues. And so, what is one small step that they can take this week?
Yeah. I think first is just wrapping their head around the idea of sex being pleasurable for a woman too. It's making sure that she believes it's okay. And that's a good starting point for anyone where maybe they haven't for a long time is, or kind of ever, is kind of figuring out and trying to think back to how was sex taught to them?
Mhm.
How was it viewed? What was the idea of um, pleasure for a wife? And really figure out are there lies that they need to break down? Are there ways that they need to kind of alter and change even just the thought process surrounding it? Because um, we can say all these, maybe behavioral things of um, ways to gear yourself up or touch yourself or any of those things. But until a woman actually believes it's okay, or kind of breaks some of the lies and replaces it with truth, those
Mhm.
behavioral things aren't going to work very well.
Yeah, yeah, that's some really good advice. That's really good. So before we wrap up, because we could be talking about this all day long, I absolutely love this topic. This is one of my favorites. I have this thing that I'm doing called rapid rounds, right? This
Mhm.
is where we give like one or two answers to, these questions. And so what is the biggest myth about a woman and orgasm?
The biggest myth is that it can't happen.
Yeah. It absolutely can. It absolutely can.
Mhm.
So what's one thing husbands misunderstand about female pleasure?
Um, hmm. That it's elusive.
Mm.
I think there's a lot of husbands that believe that it's maybe made up, that they also aren't sure that it's actually able to happen.
Mhm, mhm. That's true. That's true. Okay, so what's one thing wives misunderstand about men and orgasm?
Um, I think there's a lot of women that think, that men don't want their wives to orgasm or that they
Mm,
don't care about their wives
mm.
orgasming.
That's good, but they do care, y'all. They do care.
Mhm.
Okay, is orgasm necessary for sex to be considered successful?
No.
Mhm,
And that's a big one, because I that one is that one can really fall into the performance idea. And then sex can become turned into this chore, or it
Mm,
turns into this almost like pass fail,
mhm.
where either you get an A or you get an F,
Yeah.
and that doesn't have to be true at all. Again, that's the idea, or maybe too much of a focus on just purely the physical component
Mhm.
of what's happening during intimacy. And um, even if two people and neither one of them experience orgasm, right? If
Mhm.
husband and wife are taking the time to be intimate together, if you're taking the time to connect in the way that God created your bodies to, um, you're taking that time just for the two of you. You're looking each other in the eyes, you're touching each other, you're caressing each other. That all by itself is beautiful and,
Mhm.
we'll say, successful.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Said short, but real quick. I love that you said that because there are a lot of men thinking that if she's not having an orgasm, then I'm not doing my job. And this is
Right.
where women are faking it. Even though they're enjoying it, they're still faking it to make sure that they feel like they're doing their job. So
Mhm.
I think it's important to understand that.
Yeah.
You don't have to have an orgasm to have good sex.
Mm-mm. Nope.
Okay, and the last one, can great sex be learned?
Yes. I think that's actually, um,
Anyway.
ra rarely are there going to be instances where, new husband, wife suddenly have amazing sex the day after they say, "I do."
Mhm,
Um, because so much of it is just different, right? Like, every woman, she's shaped different. Every woman's, all of her parts fit together a little bit differently. Guy
mhm,
size is different. Like, there's so many different variables that it's
mhm,
having to figure out exactly what works best for them. And honestly, that is why. So there are lots of married couples that I have worked with who are positive, beautiful married couples who have been together for decades, and they will absolutely say that they have way better sex now, later in life than they did early in their marriage. They will
yeah,
acknowledge maybe not as often as early in marriage, um, but they know each other so much better. They know their bodies so much better. They have connected emotionally, cognitively, spiritually for so much longer that the beauty, like the beautiful output of the physical component of intimacy is so much more intense and intimate and passionate. So these are absolutely lifelong lessons that a married couple can be having for great sex later on in their marriage too.
absolutely, absolutely. Listen, great sex is a learned behavior, okay?
Mhm.
It is a learned behavior. And just like you said, like it's not going to be something that just coming out of the gate,
Mm-mm.
bam, you
Yep.
might experience it sometimes, but there is nothing more intimate than, the sexual intimacy that you build versus the activity. And
Right.
so the intimacy builds the activity, and you
Mhm.
learn that through learning each other. And so I love that answer. If a woman is listening right now and feels
Mhm.
discouraged, what would you want her to know?
Yeah. I would want her to know that she is worth experiencing pleasure, right? Again, God designed your body. He put you together exactly the way that He chose to put you together. He gave women. He gave women the clitoris. He gave us opportunities to experience pleasure. If it wasn't meant for a woman to feel pleasure in the way that they can, we wouldn't have all the parts in the way that he created. Um, so it's knowing that it is okay, and more than okay, it's beautiful for
Mhm.
you to be experiencing pleasure in the way God designed you to be able to.
I love that, Melissa. I love that. I absolutely love it. Listen, y'all, Melissa has brought so many gems in this episode. I'm so excited for you guys to sit in and, tune into all the things that she said that can be so helpful for where you're at right now. But Melissa, I want you to share, where can people reach you? How can they get in contact with you?
Yeah. So I have a podcast too. It's Forward Path with Melissa, Life and Marriage God's Way. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, YouTube, kind of wherever you find podcasts. So you can find me there. I do also have a website. It's melissagendreau.com. On there, I have a lot of different things. I have some free resources. I have devotional page. I have 6 different courses. One of the courses is called Sex and Marriage. There is also another course called You Don't Have to Love Your Body, Just Respect It. And then I have 2 different coaching programs and a private community. Sometimes all of the options feel a little bit overwhelming of like, where should I start? So honestly, follow me on Instagram. It's Forward Path with Melissa. And then DM me. I would love that. Just DM me start. So I can get to know you individually. I would love to get to know your story so that I can help plug you in at whatever of my products or whatever area that is, even if it's just reinforcement to get some free resources or listen to the podcast so you can get to know me a little bit better too.
I love it. I love it. Y'all, listen, make sure you contact Melissa, okay? She has a lot of great products, and you can definitely tell from this episode that her products are going to be beneficial to you from where you're at. But listen, this has been a great episode. If you are in a position where you have been struggling with having orgasms, or there is a gap for you, it's not the end, right? This episode is an invitation for you to be able to learn, to be able to communicate, and to just slow down a little bit and explore with your spouse how you can improve and enhance together, right? It's not just about pleasure, but it's about partnership with you and your spouse to be able to come together and, explore the options and how you can grow desire and all the things. And so, let this be the start of the conversation for you to be able to explore curiosity within your marriage. And so just remember that you are not broken. Your marriage is not doomed. There is a lot available to you. So thank you again for tuning into the Sex Ed for Saints podcast. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation.
Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Now, friends, if this conversation blessed you, do me a favor. Take a moment to leave a review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, because you already know we need more faith-filled, real conversations like this in the world. And listen, I know you heard a gem today, something that made you pause, something that made you think, something that made you say, woo, this was for me. But friend, it might not be just for you. So go ahead and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Send it to a friend, a spouse, a sister in Christ, somebody who's been feeling stuck or silent in this area. Let's spread healing, freedom, and truth one conversation at a time. And until next time, we're going to get candid, but keep it God. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Where hearts get free, learning our bodies with holy therapy. God wrote desire with love in the mix. Sex Ed for Saints, Mondays at 6. This the space where hearts get free, learning our bodies with holy therapy. God wrote desire with love in the mix. Sex Ed for Saints, Mondays at 6. Doing it Mondays at 6. Come and sing this up. Oh, I come and sing this.